Hey guys, today I interviewed Tim Winslow, a good friend of mine and a guide and outfitter up in Alaska. Talk about do-it-yourself options in Alaska, and we dive deep into the whole grizzly brown bear defense side of things. Specifics on guns that Tim suggests, also just the dynamic, how to avoid conflict with grizzlies. A lot of this is for sure going to apply to hunts you go on in Alaska, guided or DIY, but it also applies to all of you guys that are hunting in grizzly country in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Those grizzlies are unhunted and in some ways even worse. We also dive into some of the block and tackling that I always cover with any guide that I have on the show. Most overrated gear, most underrated gear, what differentiates the hunters that get it done versus just the average guy. We cover it all. Let's get right to it. All right, guys, so I wanted to mention that I'm having these custom skinning knives made. These are called Cliff Skinner. I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I've had this knife made the way that it's made. Got a short video on the website. The details are there. pursuitwithcliff.com. Click in the corner up by shop. You'll see Cliff Skinner. Click that puppy. You'll get all the details. Tim, great to have you on, man. I just got done spending a week with you up in your neck of the woods in Alaska. Great time, man, but I got screwed up on schedule, and I feel a little bit jet lagged just from hunting bears from we were going out at 1 o'clock and then coming back basically at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, it was a wet week you had out there with us. It was wet and windy.
Yeah, it for sure brought my attention to when Alaskans say make sure and bring good rain gear.
Yeah.
It's serious business, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny. I'm just glad that you and your guides are saying that you're like, hey, it actually was bad weather for Alaska. Because a couple days in, I was like, man, this is way worse than I expected.
No, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, when I pull you aside and I go, hey, Cliff, like for real, like this is actually bad weather. This is like the hunting is slow, but this like actually doesn't get that much worse than this. It's not just like, this is bad. This is not a good time to hunt. But yeah, it was.
Yeah,
a couple of those nights, man, it was blowing like 35, 40 and raining sideways, and you guys were still like, you guys were grinding it out. I was shocked. You guys were.
Dude, it's crazy, Tim, because I'll be honest about something with the fall bear hunting up there. One, even with the weather, I thought the bear hunting was good, man. Like, just it was challenging because of the conditions.
Yeah.
Kind of limited our logistics and stuff, and you can get into that. But I thought there's a ton of bears around. It was fun to see the brown bears that you guys have up there.
Yeah.
Huge, and all that was really cool to see. But I was amazed because I have a fair amount of experience in the fall in the western mountain states. I was actually amazed at the difference in the behavior of bears there. And
So how did it differ from what you've seen?
Yeah, so one thing that was stark to me, and tell me if this is just like weather based or if it's always the case. The bears were moving around a lot more. As an example, if I find a black bear in some chokecherry or oak brush or whatever, like right at dark in Colorado in the fall, and we can't kill him, the next day I'm gonna like most likely catch him in that exact same run.
They'll be in that spot.
Yeah, or maybe like the next shoot over.
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with weather, Cliff. I think.
Okay.
It's pretty similar to the bear habits up here in the fall. Maybe not quite as like. They may not be in the exact same spot, but you'll see the same bears over and over. But I think the weather did have them tucked in those alders pretty hard. I believe they spent a lot more time sleeping and just hanging out, getting out of the rain and out of the wind a little bit. So,
okay.
But the difference in Alaska too is that the bear's biological clock is a lot more strict because they are actually like, if they do not eat enough, they are going to die in the springtime. Like if they don't have enough calories before they den up and that spring lasts, or the winter lasts into the spring, they're going to die. So I believe that overall they do move more so than the bears in the lower 48, just because the winters are so much harsher up here, and if they don't have calories, they're dead.
Yeah.
So
and they're longer, right?
they're longer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I mean, I know it probably varies each year, but do you have an idea of when they're like, when is it pretty much like the black bears are all hibernating? And then when do they generally come out there?
Yeah, typically it's like it starts in October, and by November 1st, usually every bear is denned up. And
Yeah,
what people think, and sometimes they get confused, is they think that it's the winter that kills bears or kills sheep or anything like that. It's actually the spring. So they have the most calories when they go right in their den. They have their most buildup, and that's the
sure.
harshest time of winter. But when you get these extended, like cold times, extended winter times deep into late April, early May, where it's still really cold, there's nothing to eat, that's when the animals have the hardest time. And so
Yeah, yeah, sure.
that's when the risks for like older animals or younger animals, especially bears and moose, that's when they get taken out by the cold,
Yeah.
is that late winter, early spring.
Yeah, basically they get up and they just can't catch up. Like they're just
Yeah,
so beat up. Yeah.
yeah,
And man,
yeah.
like bears, I'm assuming brown bears and grizzlies are the same, Tim, but tell me if I'm wrong. But when they get up, they eat fairly low, like low calorie food. They're just eating grass, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
I
are
mean,
you
is that
talking
the
about from
same?
the spring, like when they
Yeah,
wake up?
yeah, when they wait,
Yeah,
they get out of the den, they're just
yeah,
eating grass. Are the brown bears and grizzlies the same?
same. Yeah, they'll get
Yeah.
up and they'll kind of pick around and find stuff. What they usually do is they'll have that grass first, but they'll go straight to riverbanks. Just go straight to rivers and kind of try to find some animals that have washed up, or old
Yeah.
kills, or kind of moose that died along the rivers throughout the winter. But that's usually what they do. But yeah, I always thought the same thing, is like they actually aren't eating very calorie rich foods when they wake up. There's those little fiddleheads that'll grow first out of the
Sure.
alders, but other than that, yeah, I think they're kind of just getting their system going at that point.
Yeah. They're gonna have a little bit of a struggle if they're behind on calories, like
Hmm.
there's a little bit of a struggle period of time.
Yeah,
But like
yeah,
you say that a lot like that's the same deal in Colorado, man. That's when you find all the deer dying is like during
yeah,
like right before they green up. They're kind of
yeah,
struggling. They got nothing to
yeah,
eat. They had a shitty winter,
yeah,
and but bears are intriguing, man. Because or I mean black bears in particular, because man, they live across so many like different latitudes. I mean, they're all the
yeah,
way down in Mexico, all the way up to
yeah,
where you guys are at. I
yeah,
mean, some places they basically don't hibernate. Like on
yeah,
even on the
yeah, like
coast, like
Florida. Yeah,
yeah, of course, yeah,
yeah,
they're not
yeah,
hibernating. So it's it's kind of amazing how adaptable they are that
yeah.
way. One question I have for you, man, because I was creating this story in my mind because as we watched the black bears, not only did they seem to move a fair amount day to day up there,
Hmm.
but like literally during the day, they were moving more. Like most of the bears
Oh
we
yeah,
saw they'd be feeding on blueberries and then they would literally, and this totally could be just anecdotal on my experience there, they would stop Tim and then they would run like 300 yards and find
yeah,
like
yeah,
at a lope to a
yeah,
new spot. And
yeah.
that was a fairly new behavior to me. Does that have anything to do with the fact that they're not like king of the mountain there?
Yes,
They're
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you'll see the brown bears doing the same thing, because there's only one or two bears that don't do that, and that's the big giant boar brown bears that are, ten
okay,
and a half foot bears. But yeah, they're always moving. The bears will make you look so stupid. You think you're
sure,
like this awesome guide that's like a bear whisperer, and you're like, yeah, we're just gonna sneak in there, and yeah, and then all of a sudden he'll just sprint away, and you're like, oh yeah, he definitely made me look like an idiot. And all the predictions, or you're like, oh yeah, we usually don't see bears here, and all of a sudden there'll just be a bear hanging out and just eating, and you're like, oh yeah, they kind of
yeah,
just do. They have that pattern up here where, especially this time of year where there's multiple sources of food, there's berries and there's fish around too, so these bears will just be popping in and out of places, basically where the bigger bears aren't. And so naturally the
yeah.
black bears will kind of be more in the higher elevation stuff, in the berries, where the brown bears will be in the lower stuff, kind of keeping them out of there. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like
the
so
movement is different.
basically, the fish keep the brown bears kind of away from them this time of
Yes.
year to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yep.
So the black bears, yeah, can kind of get away from them. Man,
Yeah.
it's interesting what you said like resonates so much, man, because there's a bunch of content out there, Tim,
Yeah.
of me saying like, hey, I've never skinned a black bear in the rain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now there's a pretty good video of
Yeah.
me and it was Mike
Yeah.
skinning a bear in the
Yeah.
rain. And when I
Yeah.
was doing it, I was like, dude, I'm telling people that I never kill them in the rain, and this one was out in the rain,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, maybe they were, they were, snuggled up in the alders a fair amount, but at some point they got
Yeah.
to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Their
You know.
clock is ticking. They got to get food. So,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. What's the let's go through the bear stuff, Tim. Well,
Yeah.
what you guys do, because it's intriguing to people. I've spent a fair amount of time in British Columbia. I was around some grizzly bears there, but I've never hunted them very much or anything. So I'd love to hear like just the breakdown of what you guys do on that front.
Yeah. So, like in where we are in Alaska, there's basically two. For black bears, we hunt the inland population of black bears versus the southeast population, that Prince of Wales and that southeast Sitka down there, where those black bears are primarily feeding on fish, where we're hunting inland black bears that are primarily feeding on berries. Our grizzlies are more coastal grizzlies, so they're not like Brooks Range interior grizzlies that are feeding on caribou and berries. Our grizzlies are feeding on a lot of fish because all these rivers and streams kind of go up into their country. So that's really the differences in the actual, like the bears. Our black bears are a little bit smaller because they don't eat fish, and then our grizzlies are a little bit bigger because they do eat fish, versus the opposite down in the southeast or in the Brooks Range or in the Arctic Range for that kind of stuff. It also gives way to a big population of grizzly bears, something that the Alaska Department of Fish and Game is actually addressing. Our grizzly bear tags are pretty liberal. Guys can come out and shoot a couple of them. They're doing predator management to try to kind of thin out some of the grizzly bears for the moose and the caribou populations to kind of get a little bit better in some areas. But for the most part, yeah, there's healthy populations, and yeah, a lot of stuff to hunt around here.
Yeah.
And a lot of game that just thrives, despite the crazy weather that Alaska has. Animals are so tough when they learn how to adapt and survive. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, no, it's a tough environment, and I was just amazed by how big your guys' grizzly or the brown bears are.
Yeah,
the ones that we saw is like, oh yeah, like I mean, admittedly, Tim, the grizzlies that I've interacted with in the interior of British Columbia for the most part, and even some of the coastal ones like in southern BC, they're not that. The ones that I have been around, they're not that much bigger than a really big black bear. You know what I mean? Like a 7-footer or 8-footer is a big interior grizzly there.
Yeah.
And we would always kill, not always, but it wasn't uncommon to kill a 7-foot black bear,
Yeah.
So your guys' bears are like next level size wise.
Yeah, they're different. They're a whole different animal down there, because it's very similar in the Arctic. Like you kill a big 7-foot grizzly in the Arctic is a big grizzly.
One.
Yeah, you're like, wow, that's good. But down here, it's just different. When these bears don't have to work for the salmon, the calories that they get, they get huge.
Yeah, it's just an intake thing.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm gonna dive into like the cliche questions on brown bears and grizzlies.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I meant to ask you when I was there, is it pretty common for your black bears to have white on them?
Yeah, so it's, for whatever reason, it's they have a lot of white in the area that we hunt. They have a lot of like the white chest. They have a lot of white markings. However, that bear that Noah did shoot, we haven't seen any bears with like white paws before, like white color on their paws, which is really weird. But we do predominantly. There's a lot more white. There's no color phase typically in our area. Mainly black with a lot of white in their chest.
Yeah, which is cool, man. Like I've seen even ones down in the States that have a white diamond, like just here. Yeah. But Noah's bear, in addition to the paws, it actually had a lot of white on its belly.
Yeah.
Like it went almost down to its navel. It was kind of neat. Dude, you know what kills me about those, Tim, is like I wish there was some other way to like to do rugs or something with that white on those black bears.
Yeah.
It kind of bums me out because in the taxidermy process, a lot of times it disappears.
Oh, yeah.
On the like, because it's always right where you open the rug
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
and then that's right where they trim. And I've
Yeah.
always thought to myself, like, man, is there a creative way to keep this on there? It's almost like the guy's got to, do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Some of those rugs do. I kind of have that same feeling. They kind of, you like lose the, there's definite elements of the bear that you lose by doing it that way. But
yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You can always do like the shoulder mount. I know you guys have one of those in your lodge.
Yeah, to kind of emphasize that chest. Yeah, we have that shoulder. Yeah.
Kind of a neat way to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, let's dive into the Grizzly stuff because I get asked about it all the time, Tim, and admittedly it's like outside of my bounds, but it's becoming more and more of a question for all the guys that are hunting elk in Montana, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Where grizzlies are becoming an issue.
Yeah.
Let's go through because I feel like your guys you're qualified on this front to answer this with some like some good backing.
Yeah.
But like when you're guiding bears, what do you carry? And then if there's any difference, if you're just carrying something for like self defense from bears, if that's different, can you kind of go over those in your thoughts?
So that's a really good question, because that's a question I get asked a lot too. And it's actually a two-phase thing. So if I'm like daily hiking or fish guiding or hunting in an area where there's grizzlies, which is everywhere that we hunt, that, in my opinion, that is the best place where like a 10 millimeter would come into play, like a 10 millimeter auto, like a Glock, because you're always out. You're kind of in an area where you may have to like scare off a bear, or at least just be able to defend yourself. And so having a 10 millimeter with a bunch of rounds in it is a really good like daily carry gun, in my opinion, or even a 9 millimeter, for example, because it's one of those situations. Most of the time, you're not actually going to kill a bear, but you may need to exert your presence there by firing a couple at his feet. Just let him know, hey, I'm serious. On top of that's your last resort in some situations, before you like really get big and yell at a bear, especially if a bear is being aggressive. But you want to have that multiple shot capability for that scaring away or notifying the bear, hey, like I mean business, don't come closer. Right. The other part of that is I carry a 44 mag revolver when I'm packing meat out. When I'm physically compromised, like if I've got 150 pounds of moose on my back and I'm just physically compromised, like I can't move real well, a 10 millimeter auto tucked under somewhere is not actually going to be my first choice. Because if I'm in a situation where I have to defend a bear, I've got meat on my back, number one, and he's probably going to jump on my back, or he's going to pin me, or he's going to come for blood. And his mindset, because there's blood already in the air, is totally different than a bear that's like, hey, I want to mess with these hikers, or I want to mess with these fishermen, and I want to get their fish. A bear's mindset when there's blood in the air it can change totally. So I'm prepared to like literally, I want one shot to go off, and go off like it could be over my shoulder, and that if I had one choice, it would be a 44 mag bullet down a bear's throat versus a semi-auto that could be pinned or could, it's different. So that's kind of the way I look at it, because in those situations, I'm not looking to scare a bear off. I'm probably going to have to do something to defend my life. And versus like if I'm walking around with like we have a SIG 320s, 10 millimeter 320s that we walk around with that are like mainly just for safety and just overall awareness, and you have a lot more rounds just to do something with. So that's kind of how I see it. Those are the two ballparks. I think you could go fully one or fully the other, but if I had a choice, I do sometimes I'll carry a semi-auto when I'm hiking, fishing, doing all those other things, and then when I'm strictly packing meat, it's a 44 mag.
I do very few endorsement deals, and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. I'll stick a link right here where you can sign up. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. So, dude, I'm gonna ask you about long guns in a minute because I know a lot of when I was with your guides, they were all carrying long guns.
Yeah.
But before I go there, a couple questions in that popped up, man. So, one, the like deterring bears by shooting at like the rocks or the ground next to them, it worked. And I was talking to I think it was Joe or Mike, and I like they were telling me about situations where it for sure works. So that like I mean, I'm naive on this, Tim. So like, how does that play out? Like, when would you do that?
So you have to have experience kind of in tight, close country with these big bears, and guides like Mike or Nate or Joe. I mean, they're absolute studs, and they're really experienced in all this. You have to use discretion, and really it comes down to seeing, and if you want to call it meeting a lot of bears, is you get their body language and their demeanor, and then you go, this bear, he's going to be trouble. But that same bear that's going to be trouble, he also can recognize trouble. So you have to match his aggression, and where you have to be careful with is you do not want to ever shoot a bear unless it's defense or life or property. But bears do understand when there's rounds going off in the tundra close by, they hear the sound, and then they can kind of feel what's going on. And so those aggressive bears are getting matched with some aggression that they may have to think twice, and 99 times out of 100, they're not going to do anything. They're going to be like, they're not worth it. They're not worth like messing around with them. But 100% works. 100% works by using that to scare bears off and to deter bears. Where, like I said, like a 44 mag 6-round revolver, that's not a good application for that. Where you're like, you have six rounds, and if he does decide, I guess I should have followed up that statement like when I was talking about how many rounds, because if a bear does decide to then get aggressive after you've already shot 4 or 5 at his feet, now you still have 4 or 5 to like actually do something about it. So, but
but dude, you said something that made a ton of sense to me, but I think it's hard. Like, it's really hard. Somebody could watch 500 videos on bear defense, YouTube videos or whatever, but it like popped in my mind when you said, hey, I carry it because I've got meat on my back. There's blood in the air. And I think some people will hear that, Tim, and they'll be like, oh, that's kind of woo woo, but it's not, dude. Like the perfect analogy is sharks. And, you're probably tired of hearing us talk about spearfishing, but dude, it's the same. It's like the same thing. It's like, I can't describe to people that like a shark's attitude. A shark can be very docile, but once there's blood, like once you've hit a fish, like it's like his intentions are not debatable.
Right.
Like he's coming to get the fish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's not coming to fuck with you. He's not coming to inspect you. Like he's coming to get the fish.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the analogy, right? Like if
it's
you got meat on your back. Go for it, man.
A lot of things that people can relate to too. Most people don't dive with sharks and spearfish like you do. But a lot of people can relate to like a dog. You get a docile family dog, and you put blood or a bone, an actual like real bloody, not like a fake bone from PetSmart.
Right.
They'll get a docile family dog to flip a switch. All of a sudden they're growling at somebody that they've never growled at, because it's an instinctual mechanism that turns on where they need to like all of a sudden they're like in their wolf phase of their mind, where they're fighting for food. And so that's kind of what happens. And you have this situation where, especially if a meat is attached to you, a bear's senses and understanding are so strong where he not only will understand that there's meat, but he will also understand that there is a male, a potentially dominant male attached to that meat as well, that is his direct competition to that meat. So if you can't get rid of that meat and run away, that's the whole point, is he's not only going to go for the meat, but he's also going to defend against any kind of dominant male that's trying to assert himself over that meat as well. So it's definitely a primal experience out there, especially how animals move and react with blood
Yeah.
specifically.
Dude, in the dog analogy is a good one, Tim, because like you say, I think most people have developed that in their life. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They got neighbors,
yeah,
even if they don't have a dog, their neighbor. Like you kind of, most people can like the little mannerisms and like the body language of a dog. They
yeah,
know when it's pissed.
yeah.
I feel like I'm sure you guys, like you and your guides, have that with bears because
Hmm.
you're exposed to them.
Yeah,
Like, and it takes a little bit of time. It seems
yeah,
like every animal is a little like for me, man. Like I know if a horse or mule's pissed.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
know from 100 yards,
yeah,
like don't get any closer.
yep,
But the shark thing and all that, it's like.
yeah,
But it takes a little bit, like it takes just a little bit for humans to pick that up, and
yeah.
then you're like, you know,
Hmm.
I I wonder, man, with the bear thing, and it may be, anybody who's ever defended themselves against a bear, like it's none of my, I'm not passing in any
Hmm.
judgment, but I do have to wonder how many of them have been shot
Yeah,
where they were just screwing with somebody,
yeah. Just
or
unnecessarily shot. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think
um,
when human fear supersedes like just common sense and really information processing, but also having education to back that up is like being educated about bear behavior before you're in bear country, so that not every act and movement from a bear is like life threatening. It definitely takes time and education to be kind of in that, not only just reading about it, but yeah, to being around bears. It's really important too. When I'm taking bow hunting clients, or when my guides are taking bow hunting grizzly clients, is to understand first and foremost, like what is that bear doing? What's his style? What's his demeanor? Is he going to be a bear that when he gets hit with an arrow is going to turn around and look for a problem and is going to try to look for whatever just bit him? Or is it going to be kind of a bear that's going to run away and maybe look back and see if something scared him? So it's just time and education and kind of being around it. But the best thing to do is get the most education before you go into bear country, because really, like
sure,
you said, defending yourself against a bear and actually shooting one is 1% of
yeah,
any
yeah,
case where bears are being aggressive. Even is
yeah,
really,
yeah,
it shouldn't happen. You should have put yourself in a position to start where that would have happened. And the only times where you really can't prevent that are like I said, when you're packing out moose meat, where you're like, hey, there's only one way to go down this thing, and if a bear decides to come out of the alders or willows and jump on me, like that's what's just going to happen, and I'm ready for it. But
yeah, and that's a tricky deal. And you guys,
yeah,
like the only worst situation, which I feel is fairly unique to you guys, is that you guys have to deal with them when they're wounded.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the guys that are hunting grizzly country in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, they just have to, really when I'm in that kind of stuff, I'm just trying to, for me personally, a lot of it is just awareness where I'm at,
yeah,
Tim. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like
yeah.
if I see a lot of grizzly sign and
Hmm.
like I can't see, it's in an area where I can't see, like I basically just like buffer it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Or if
yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah,
there's a bear in there, like I just try to avoid it as
yep,
much as I can from that perspective. But you bring up this meat thing, and I think it applies probably very much so to these unhunted grizzly
hmm,
populations. Do you notice that your brown bears, do you think they are habituated to it? Like they know when it's moose season and they're looking
yeah,
for gut piles? Yeah, they
100%.
do.
Yeah,
Um, what makes you think that they show up a lot?
yeah. I think that they it's it's very similar to what I've seen in the lower 48, when hunting season's around and you have like packs of coyotes that
Yeah,
know it's
sure.
hunting season, and
Yeah,
they'll go and raid camps because they know it's hunting season. So yeah, these bears know um, when the moose hit the dirt. They know when there's blood in the air, and they just wait. And I
yeah,
think the biggest thing too, kind of what you said, is having common sense. Is the more experienced you are in grizzly country, the more common sense you exercise. Like
yeah, yeah.
the more you avoid it, the more you be like, that's not the right situation, or maybe I can avoid some of those areas, even though I may have more experience in grizzly areas than other people, and I'll be like, oh, I could go. You just don't worry about it. It's like, no, just the more
Sure.
you can exercise common sense, the better. But yeah, I think the bears. I'm not necessarily sure about the whole dinner bell like analogy that they use, where like, oh yeah, the
Yeah, they
bears
hear
hear
a
the
gun, they
gunshot,
come.
it's a dinner
Yeah,
bell.
yeah.
Yeah, but in the same token, their sense of smell is superior to any other animal that I've
Yeah,
ever
they
come
pick it up
across.
quick.
So they know
Yeah,
when things are dead, and they know when you'll
yeah,
leave. I mean, you'll see both kinds of bears, black bears or brown bears. I mean, they know when you like leave that carcass. Immediately they'll know, and they'll come and like within minutes they'll be on it in some cases.
yeah.
So
Yeah, have you ever had one get on it while you were working on it, like you left something overnight, Tim?
so interestingly enough, for moose, I usually am very cautious about where we actually hang the meat, and very cautious um, about trying to prevent any kind of bear behavior on it. So we typically leave a lot of scent around the carcass. We leave a lot of stuff to try to prevent brown bear activity. The activity that I have had, and I've had multiple encounters, is actually killing other bears. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had multiple situations where we kill a big brown bear and another bigger brown bear catches that wind and actually comes and tries to claim the carcass. And I've actually had to forfeit a carcass for the time being for a brown bear, because a brown bear came and and I had a client and a packer with me, and a brown bear actually charged us off of it. And I was like, hey, I was getting it skinned out as he was charging down the mountain at us, and I was like, hey guys, get close. I'm gonna get this thing as close as I can before I got to get off of it, because I wasn't going to
Yeah,
fight
yeah.
with a client and
Yeah, yeah,
packer
yeah.
right there. I was going to be like, hey, I'm choosing my battles here.
Yeah,
And
you basically you're gonna have to kill another bear if you want the
right.
thing.
And
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. A no
not a
go.
situation.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the bear's charging down the mountain at us, and I'm getting this thing skinned out, and I got it just skinned out enough to where the bear, he came in and we backed off, and like I said, his mind was on blood, and we were not going to fight him for that. So we
Sure.
backed out and we slipped away, and I came back the next morning, and he buried it with snow, and he was laying on top of it. But what he had done, I had already peeled back the hide for him. So the
Yeah,
hide was in almost perfect shape, because he peeled back the hide and just started eating the hind quarter. So it was a
yeah,
win-win.
yeah.
And I had another one of my guides come with me, and we shoot him off. We kicked him out of
Mm-hmm.
there when he was full of meat. And we had two people, which is another thing that we should talk about too, is just having multiple people and aware in
Sure.
situations where there's meat. But yeah, we kicked him off the carcass, and I finished skinning him out where my guide buddy was watching, and yeah, had relatively little damage to the hide, so it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Makes sense. I mean, he doesn't want to eat hair. You
no,
already had it
yeah,
skinned. He just going for the
yeah,
meat. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's wild. Jump into well, I mean, I was going to ask you, Tim, like,
yeah,
so, because I think this obviously applies to, your neck of the woods. If guys are, if guys are not doing guided stuff, they're doing
hmm,
do-it-yourself black
yeah,
bear hunts or whatever. This could be
yeah,
relevant, moose hunts, whatever. But it, again, also applies to this growing deal in the States. What's your protocol on that? Like, go over the two-person kind of strategy or
yeah,
multiple people, but also, like, if like you're working on a moose or whatever, and there's a brown bear around. What's
hmm.
kind of like what's your strategy?
Um, obviously we can't choose everywhere where we kill a moose.
Yeah,
They die where they die. But almost 100% of the time you're going to be with somebody hunting a moose.
sure.
DIY, like solo hunting DIY moose in Alaska and elk in Montana or in some of that grizzly country I mean, you have to use a lot of common sense and
Sure.
awareness. And also, you actually probably shouldn't be shooting things anywhere. You really have to be careful where you shoot things. But for the most
Yeah.
part, 90% of the time we are with somebody, and that can be a 70-year-old client in my case, where maybe I'm guiding a guy, a moose hunter, and he's not physically fit enough to help me with this moose quarter or hang a leg or do these things. But what he can do is be a lookout. And so
Yeah.
100% of the time I'm skinning a moose, and the client and or packer apprentice guide is on guard, literally on guard, just listening and watching, because these moose die in such thick country that these bears, they can get close without you ever knowing. But he's got one racked in the chamber on safe and watching 100% of the time, while the other guy, which is me, is skinning and butchering and getting the animal ready to hang and everything like that. And I will usually have like my rifle somewhere within arm's reach at all times.
Yeah.
And that's just something that is just good overall from an approach standpoint, is always have somebody watching. It's always those times where you think you can take an hour off, or you can rest against a tree. Not when there's blood in the air. You rest when you're
Yeah.
back at camp. You rest when you're hiking back. When there's blood and you have to get that meat out of there and you have to prepare it, you have to be on guard in grizzly country and brown bear
Yeah.
country. So that's
Yeah. And
the biggest way to prevent any instances.
yeah, sure. Just yeah, be preemptive and be always looking.
Yeah.
And when we were skinning that one bear, man,
Yeah.
Mike was good about that, because I mean, it's not something I deal with a lot,
Yeah.
Tim. So it's like not on the top of my mind.
Yeah.
And I got reminded, we were skinning that bear, and Mike like popped up and he's like, "Where's my gun?"
Yeah.
And I was thinking to
Yeah.
myself, and it didn't click to me.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, he wants to make sure it's near him." You
Yeah.
know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. Yeah.
It did. In my mind, I was like, "Well, hunt's over. This
Hunt's
is all
over.
good." And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And when he said that, it clicked. I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have to pack this bear
Yeah.
down through all those alders and stuff." And,
Yeah.
you know,
And those are the brown bear snacks too, the black bears. You know, like
Yeah,
those are
sure.
the ones that a brown bear smells like. Ooh, yeah, I'm gonna go snack on that black bear. But yeah,
dude, it's funny you say that though. Like, just bears in general, I don't think people realize how much they like to eat each other. Even
Yeah.
I mean, black bears the same way, man.
Yeah.
We'd kill a black bear in Colorado or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
the most likely thing to find on it the next day on the
Yeah.
gut pile is another black bear.
yeah.
You know,
It's,
yeah, they obviously are in. You know, that's they're not deterred by cannibalism, I guess.
no, yeah, they're always looking for. It's that biological clock, man. They're looking for calories any way they can get it.
Free meal,
whether
yeah.
it's on another bear, or it's in the bushes and blueberries or anything like that. Yeah, they're driven.
No, for sure. Go for the long gun part of that, Tim. Like, what you guys carry on that front?
So we typically carry 375s. So either a 375 H&H or 375 Ruger. The 375 Ruger has been the predominant choice for the guides over the years. I think just for the standpoint, the ammo is very easy to get. The 375 Ruger is in a little bit smaller magazine, a little bit smaller chamber, and which matters when you're reloading. So when you hear that, it actually matters. I have both, but a 375 like H&H is like clearly a lot longer than a 375 Ruger, which when you've got to do that real quick, those milliseconds do matter.
Just the shorter action stroke.
Yeah, shorter action, exactly. Yeah. And when I first started guiding, everybody was like a 338 Win Mag. The 375 Ruger hadn't come out yet. And 338 Win Mags are really, really good. They don't have the stopping power that a 375 does. So a 375 Ruger or H&H will typically, you'll shoot 300 grain bullets out of it that can actually stop an animal. And what a 375 Ruger does, it actually gives you a little bit more range if an animal's running away from you at 250 yards. It's 100% doable shot. And that's where it supersedes like the 458 lot or the 416s and some of those bigger straight wall type cartridges that have a lot of stopping power, but they don't have a lot of reach. But that 375 Ruger kind of fits both of those pretty well, where you can shoot animals far and you can stop them close. And so that's kind of what everybody's ended up at. And for the most part, that's what we all carry.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And I think that people don't think about like people get so stuck on like the self-defense, or just like they're the hunter and they're making the shot or whatever. They get stuck on that component, and they don't think about the component that I noticed that all you guys are very cognizant of, and that's that once one of these things gets a hole in it, like we need to kill it before it gets into some like nasty shit. And that's a good caliber for that too, right? I mean, 200-300 yards. You're
exactly.
good to go.
The trajectory is pretty reasonably flat considering a 300 grain bullet or a 270 grain bullet. So it's realistic. I mean, if you shoot a brown bear or a grizzly bear and he's running away, and you have to make a decision, whether to shoot him on the run at 300 yards, and you need something that you can do that with. So it comes up clutch more often than not.
Yeah, sure. And you guys are dealing with like such a different element, Tim. But even with black bears. I because I have found that they're one of the harder animals to track from just
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have to deal with danger.
Yeah.
Black bears, I'm not as concerned about that,
Yeah.
but I'm more concerned about just losing them once they get into the thick
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm always like, man, man, if you can kill them before they get into the brush, like please do.
Yeah.
But you guys, like that's next level.
Yeah, you have to keep shooting. As we tell all of our guys, hunters, like, do not stop shooting. Yeah, the
Right.
if you stop shooting, then we have to start shooting, because that bear, if he gets in those alders, what they do is they'll dig a big hole. They'll crawl into these alder patches, real thick areas, and those of guys that haven't been in alders, it's just like thick, impenetrable bush tree type things. They'll get in, they'll dig a big hole and they'll lay in it like sick. Like if they're gut shot, they'll lay in there sick, and they're not even visible if you're like sneaking through the alders. They're actually like ground level, because they just dug this huge hole to kind of lay in and crawl into, and it really makes our job a little bit more dangerous when you literally have to step on them before you see them. So yeah, the more bullets you can put into those things, the better, and just to get them stopped, for not only an ethical perspective, but also just a safety perspective as well.
Yeah, just in getting them. Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, that makes sense. I have to ask, man, because I know a lot of guys shoot them, but
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's a trajectory thing. But the
Yeah.
4570, do you have a thought on it?
Yeah,
Joe carries one.
I know Joe carries one. There's a couple other guides that carry them, and I always give them a hard time about it, just because if there was buffalo still roaming in the earth, I think the 4570 would have a lot of validity in it as a hunting round. But because we aren't shooting buffaloes off horseback anymore, and we do have a lot more superior cartridges available to us, the 4570 is obsolete in my opinion. I think it's a great close range gun,
Sure.
and it looks really cool, which I think that's why everybody buys it. For the record, I think it looks cool.
Yeah, I do too.
One fatal flaw that anybody who's listening that likes their 4570, one fatal flaw that I see over and over again, is because they don't shoot it and they don't practice with it and they go out and try to hunt with it. They're laying down prone and they shoot it for the first time. Their adrenaline's going. They try to reload. They're laying on the reload. They can't reload because we're so used to laying prone. You can do that with it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's got a really good place in like Western reenactments. I don't think it has a good place in Alaska, but that's just my opinion. There's probably some hate that I'll get for that. I think it's decent for like a fishing anti-bear fishing gun. But even then, I think there's better choices for that. But.
Yeah, it's kind of like a big pistol, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a big pistol. Yeah.
But like you said, they do look cool, and I get it from that. I think they're kind of fun. I don't know that it's relevant, Tim, but I would be worried about, because your guys' conditions are so rough.
Yeah.
I would be worried about them getting screwed up. Yeah. Just because the actions and it's hard to tear apart a lever action.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's a lot of moving parts for sure. Like in there, how it all works. Like getting tundra stuffed into the extractor and things like that. Like, that's a real. Our guns get wet and they get dirty and they get kicked around, and they have to be pretty reliable. So that is another factor as far as what you choose to hunt with. Right.
I mean, I know it's not like proper practice, but a guy, shoves his gun down, he shoves his bolt action down in the mud.
Yeah.
He can take the bolt out and stick a stick down it. You know what I mean? It's whereas it's hard on a lever action. So and in your guys' neck of the woods, that kind of stuff matters.
Yeah, it does.
It's hard.
Reliability is first and foremost, for sure.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to my audience, Tim. I know you guys do a bunch of guided stuff with Bushwhack and tons of great options there. But first off, I love your YouTube channel, man. And on your YouTube channel, you everybody should check it out. It's just Timmy Winslow. I love the fact you just went with your name too, man.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. Yeah. I was like, you know what, dude? I'm not gonna make up some some horseshit name. I just got to go with my name and just like try to focus on it. So I give you props for that.
Yeah.
But when I was on here, you cover some stuff. You cover a bunch of Arizona stuff because
Yeah.
you do guide there
Yeah.
also, but you cover a lot of stuff that's Alaskan centric that would apply to a do-it-yourself hunter. So
Yeah.
I want to pick your brain a little bit on that, dude.
Yeah.
One video I have to mention. Oh, dude, there's one on here, Tim, where it's a you're skinning a moose quarter.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool, man. It doesn't have a lot of views, but
No,
it's kind of
yeah.
like, do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's are you going to eat? It's only got 270 views. That thing should
Yeah.
have a couple 100,000 views. It's oh shit, I bumped my chair.
That was kind of just a fun thing that I wanted to do. It's like what we always get asked, Cliff. I'm sure you get asked this by people. Well, what do you do with it after you shoot it? You know, are you going to eat it?
Yeah,
And
sure.
like people actually need to know, like, this is where meat comes from. You know, this is how we live. So yeah,
Yeah, and
that was just a fun video I made. I was like, I had a moose quarter that I was like, yeah, you know what? Throw a little clip together. So
yeah, no, there's a creative way to depict it, dude. I like it.
Yeah.
But I got sidetracked, man.
Yeah.
The options for do-it-yourself
Yeah.
Alaskan stuff. Hey, and as you cover them, Tim, like, I guess look at it from a perspective of like a guy that's only hunted, elk and deer in
Yeah.
the West. Like where would you suggest the guy starts if he wants to go on that adventure?
Yeah, so Alaska has a lot of really good DIY options. The mountain goat, Dall sheep, grizzly bear, brown bear, you have to have a guide. Legally, you have to have a guide. You legally have to have a guide if you're a non-resident alien. So if you're from Canada, you have to have a guide. But for those of us that are in the lower 48, there's awesome stuff. I think a really good start is caribou, moose, black-tailed deer, or black bear. And they each have their own little, I don't know, benefit. I think one of the reasons why I like black bear to start if you're a DIY hunter and kind of get after it is it gives you that same, whatever approach that you want to do. You can go on like a backpack black bear hunt and have the same like fly-in trip adventure as you would at a Dall sheep hunt. You have that like initial trip into Alaska where you're like, dude, this is remote. This is epic. The scenery is unbelievable. It doesn't come with a crazy price tag. Black-tailed deer, there's tons of black-tailed deer like down in the southeast and on Kodiak that are a great entry level. Hey, let's go try out Alaska. You may not be successful the first time, but DIY hunts should be geared to be like, hey, I want to do this a couple times and dial it in.
Yeah.
And then moose and caribou are a little trickier. Caribou has been getting harder and harder just because they've been cutting different tags in certain areas in Alaska. But it's another great place to start. The moose, you have to have a little bit more logistics planned out before you go on a moose hunt, especially DIY. And you don't want to do it solo. I mean, you can, but you really want to have a buddy with you for a number of different reasons. But it's an awesome place to start. I mean, I always tell guys, you can go on 3 DIY moose hunts before you pay for a guided one. You know, you can do it over and over again. And if you're not at that phase in your life where you're like bucket list, I only have a couple hunts left, you're not physically fit enough to kind of get out in the mountains by yourself, and you're in a position where you're like, hey, I'm 45 years old. I've got a little bit of money that I can spend on hunts every year now. My kids are getting out of college or in college. I'm pretty good. I can go on some trips. It's a great place to get after it because I think it's so much more rewarding doing things by yourself. As long as you're dialed in. I mean, you got to weigh the risks, and time does matter. But I think we're at a place too where we can educate people. Like, I feel like that's what I like to do is help guys understand what they're getting into, because there's you can watch a lot of videos from guys that you have these successful hunts, and that's great, but you have to understand what it takes to kind of get there and make it all happen. And it may not happen on your first try. So, Alaska.
Dude, I think you nailed it, Tim, because it's like the moose deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
The moose deal for me, I can go watch a moose video, a moose hunt video on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, this is easy. I just get a moose tag.
Yeah.
I call somebody up. They fly me into a lake. I do the do-it-yourself thing. Fly out.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
that when I think about it next level, I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to get a set of 50-inch plus antlers back to the States. I got to figure out how to get the meat out, which people don't realize. There's a whole different set of rules that imposes a lot more than even though elk in the States are much smaller than moose, there's even rules beyond that make it so you're going to have to take out even more proportionally amount of meat. So there's all these things that's the kind of stuff that most of the content doesn't go over, man.
Yeah. The legal attachments to meat recovery in Alaska are there's different. No one even close. There's nothing even close as far as the strict level of meat salvage requirements, to the point where they can fly over a carcass and land on it and then go find out if you actually took the right amount of meat or not over that carcass. And because they can do that legally in Alaska and go fly, and they'll say, I know personally some guys that shot caribou back in the day, and they had people fly in and land and check the ribs and see if they got all the rib meat out. So it's that's the kind of stuff, Cliff, that we don't really practice on elk. Like, we take everything off of an elk, but we're not like, hey, did you get that brisket? Like, did you make sure that brisket's on there? Are you taking the ribs? Like, do you have to leave the ribs on the bone? Like, all these things that in elk country, we're like, we took all the meat, like everything. We did. We're rolling, but like maybe there was like some got chewed up or some bloodshot or whatever. And but it's strict. And just the overall size, I think, is different than an elk. Just the overall like mass of meat. But for
sure. There's just the numbers, but most elk like carcass, after the meat's been packed out on elk, if you went into the gut pile in Colorado, like some over-the-counter unit, like most of those carcasses, the Alaska Fish and Game guys would bust the guys.
100%. You'd be getting a ticket. Yeah, for sure.
So you got to get accustomed to like that kind of stuff, and that's
I think one of the fundamental differences is boning out. You can't bone out a moose. You can't do it. It's illegal to bone out a moose. So, and that's like something that's like second nature if you're backcountry hunting in the lower 48. Like, that's what you do. If you shoot an elk somewhere back in some nasty spot, you're going to bone it out. And same with a mule deer or anything else. So that's the first barrier that you have to be ready for. So.
No, that's all good stuff. I gotta do one day, man. Like, I'd like to do the do-it-yourself. A do-it-yourself moose hunt would be fun. Like, what? Totally ballpark, Tim. But can a couple guys pull it off and like that? Like, what do you think it costs per guy if like two guys want to go? Like, is it like a $6,000 to $10,000 adventure?
Yeah, it's like it just kind of depends on the situation. But I think overall, it's like you've got two choices, right? You got like, you can go through like your own fully on your own DIY situation where you're bringing your own stuff and you're figuring out your own logistics. And I think for that, a guy can probably do it for around $7,000 to $10,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Including like the license and tag, which is another $1,000. And you got to kind of prepare for the travel, just getting to and from Alaska. And then obviously it goes up if you want more assistance. Like, there's air taxis that do it. There's guides that help DIY stuff, and it'll go up from there. But every level you go up, all the way up to a guided hunt, you get what you pay for. You get like help in areas that you need. So I think like the average, guided moose hunt right now is between $30,000 and $40,000, where DIY, even like an assisted outfitted type DIY hunt, is like $12,000 to $15,000. So you're doing it at least for half the price. And then, like I said, if you went straight like solo and you're doing it, figuring it all out by yourself, you could probably do it for that 6 to 10 range. You figuring everything out.
Yeah, and that probably sounds like a lot of money to some people, Tim, when they think about a DIY hunt. Yeah. But Alaska's different, man. It's like different.
It is different.
The logistics are completely different.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of
the fuel and just the food. Everything is way different.
Yeah. And then the reality is too is I think that this is maybe the way I think about it, but
Yeah.
I think that when we're in the States, we have a tendency to look at hunts like we look at. I mean, I'll talk to guys in there and they say, "Oh, well, I live in Florida. I'm going to Wyoming for a do-it-yourself elk hunt."
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk to them about like their budget, they're like, "Oh, I think I'm doing it for $2,000." And it's like, no, you're not,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, no, you're
not by the time, like,
That's what
not
you're
by
telling
the
your
time.
wife, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not accounting for like all the other stuff that piles up as you get, the processing and all the just like you're not accounting for all of that. Where I think when you plan a trip to like Alaska or New Zealand or something like that, like the price tag is like up. It's kind of upfront because you figure it all out.
Yeah.
And so there might not be as much difference as people think. You know what I mean?
Yep. I've had guys that called me for that same reason, and they start doing the math on something. They're like, "Well, man, I was going to go on a hunt in this, in Montana, but shoot, man, for that money, I might as well just do it in Alaska." And,
sure.
So it's kind of like I feel like a lot of guys are on this like they'll have their hunts that they'll pay for every year. They'll go on their trips like every year they can afford this, but like then every so often, every 3 to 5 years, they'll be able to go on like a little bit more of a trip, like a trip to Africa or like you said, New Zealand or Alaska, and kind of get like a bigger trip every so often that, kind of is like an adventure bucket list type situation. So.
Yeah. And it's so funny. And you mentioned Africa. Like I always, one of my personal problems, Tim, is like I view the world and there's just too many freaking adventures to go on. There's like not enough time.
Yeah.
But it's funny in the hunting context because to me, Alaska and Africa both sound super fun for very completely different reasons.
Totally
like when
opposite.
I think about, when I think about Africa, I think about like a target rich environment and like, the whole safari kind of deal. But then Alaska, it's very much there's obviously game around, but it's all about the environment, right? And the reality is like kind of like the logistical pain in the ass that Alaska is. That's kind of part of the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think Alaska is the pilgrimage for every hunter.
Yeah.
Like I think it's the Mecca. Like every hunter, as soon as they kill their first eastern whitetails, like what's the ultimate? And so it's like the ultimate. At some point it's like I'm going to Alaska, man. I'm gonna try it. And so even for me at a young age, just like shooting rabbits in the desert, like Alaska always came up to be like, what was Fred Bear doing? What was this stuff? Where was he at? This is and so I think every hunter has that drive in them to kind of test. I guess the Alaska is like a test. That like logistics and the physical nature of it is like we want to in the end be tested and see what we can do. Where Africa is like, I want like white linen sheets and like nice, I want target rich environment. I want like a pH a South African pH to kind of like, be cracking jokes and doing all that stuff and driving me around the Land Cruiser. And,
totally different deals. It is interesting in that, dude. I hate to say it because I think it doesn't give Alaska the credit that it deserves, but I also think some of the obsession is analogous to the obsession that people have with elk in the West, and that's the animals are just big.
Yeah.
Just physically big.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when we saw moose up there, I'm like, man, I've seen moose in Colorado and but that's a huge moose.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's like an element of like if there was a mastodon, we would like that would be the ultimate. Whatever's like the biggest is like The first time I ever walked up on a bull moose, when I was an apprentice packer like a long time ago, I was like, this is a prehistoric beast. I was this is actually a dinosaur. Like I've never seen anything this big. So it definitely has that ground shock to you. There's no ground shrinkage.
Don't. Right, you don't have people walk up and be like, "Oh, I thought it was going to be bigger."
Yeah. It's not that. Yeah.
Pretty rare,
I thought he was a 9-pointer and he's really an 8. Yeah, no, it's not like that.
Just like, whoa, thing's huge. How are we going to get this thing out of here?
That's the first question. You're like, oh, we got to get this thing out. Yeah.
It's a project.
Yeah.
Cool. Tim, I'm going to hammer through a couple questions that I ask every guide or outfitter I have on here, and then I'll let you go, man, because I'm pushing time. But all right, you can answer these in whatever context you want. I might like follow up if I want a little more depth because there's some of them that might apply to Alaska and elk hunting and stuff. So we'll get into it. So top so when we think about gear, what is a piece of gear that you think is fairly overrated, and what's a piece of gear that you think is underrated? And maybe in terms of how much emphasis is put on it in people's mind.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of gear that I think are overrated. I think knives are a little overrated. I think we talked about that when you're here. I'm like, we all have a knife that'll work on just about everything. Knives and I think you can do it just about everything, because I've forgotten all my knives and had to skin a moose with a Leatherman at one point. So you could get things done. I do think that high quality knives are important. I think the emphasis on the time spent versus the actual importance of people spending their money on not, and I don't know. I think it's just one of those things. I think probably from a campfire 10,000 years ago, I think men have always been obsessed with knives and spears and being like, well, my spear is sharper than that. You know what I mean? I think it's actually just internal with men and hunters in general.
Because I think you're right, Tim. Because I sell a knife, man, and guys like it, and I view it as I want people to use it in the field, but it's also it's like a collector's mentality. I don't think from a practical standpoint high-end knives are that useful at all, to be totally honest with you. If I was just out there trying to whip through the project, get this elk quartered up, there's a lot of knives in the $20 to $30 range that I might prefer. You know what I mean? Your opinion might differ, but I'm with you on it, man. I think it's exactly what you say. I'm a collector of the freaking things.
I love knives. I love knives too. I'm I'm not immune to it. I just think that I laugh at myself because I'm ooh, I look at whatever Montana knives or whatever Cliff's knife he's got. It's I don't actually need that. I want it, and I feel like it makes me a better hunter if I have it. But that's one thing.
Yeah, so on that, Tim, and dude, I whatever you say, I'm excited to hear. If a guy was just getting into hunting and he's like, hey, I'm bare bones on the gear front. I need to get a knife. What would you tell him to get?
I would probably have him get one of those ones. I like the one that Havalon had, that Jim Shockey. It was Jim Shockey's knife. It had a flip up blade and the Havalon. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I don't even know if they make them anymore.
Yeah, I don't. But
something of that nature of not just the Havalon.
Yep. You're talking about it has a fixed blade on it and a Havalon.
An outdoor edge knife is for anybody getting into it, outdoor edge, they can replace them, or a strong fixed blade. I like the Mora knives personally. What I'm talking about? They're really popular with the bushcraft, fieldcraft dudes.
Super easy to sharpen.
And I carry that for getting into joints and things like that. But I think
the thing about them is the Mora comes in a sheath that's easy to clean. It's plastic sheaths or whatever. So, no, dude, I'm with you. I just for pure hunting. I'm all about if a guy's trying to save money and just wants, I just get a Havalon. You know what I mean, or But nah, dude, I totally get it. And then underrated.
I think one of the biggest piece of underrated gear, it kind of comes with the territory. It's not, everybody doesn't need it, but I think a good tripod for Western hunting. If we're talking strictly Western hunting, I think if you get a good pair of binos out of the way, your next big investment to me should be a tripod, because it has multiple uses. You can shoot off of them. Obviously you can glass off of them. You can film off of them. They're really, really in my experience, I've always regretted having a crappy tripod. And then I've never been like, it's just like binos. You never regret buying a good pair of binos. Like, it sucks, they're expensive, but you're never like, oh, I see that animal so good, man, I should have never bought these. You're like, no, you're like, yeah, I'm so glad I bought these. And it's the same with a tripod. So a good tripod, whatever that is for you and your budget, I think the best you can afford in that direction is in my opinion, it'll serve a lot of different purposes to make you, again, shooting or glassing or anything like that.
Yeah, and the tripods and the tripod head, I feel like it's one of those things, man, that for sure, and I was guilty of this, like, you get good optics, and then a lot of guys tend to want to go like cheesy on the tripod.
Yeah.
And then they'll eventually get a good one, but it just it's hard. It's hard because like I don't know if it's like a marketing thing or what, Tim, but it feels okay. Like when you buy a pair of Swaros or something, you're like, these are like, I've been waiting to get these.
Yeah.
And then when you spend $500 on a tripod, or by the time you get the pan head, I don't know what they cost now, but you might be $600-700 deep pretty easy. Yep. You look at it and you're like, man, that's some bullshit. This seems expensive.
Nobody's taking selfies or like pictures on their Instagram stories of a tripod. They're taking pictures of their binos and unboxing. Nobody's taking unboxing video. And that's why it's hard. It's just like having a really nice rifle and a really nice scope and buying crappy rings. It's like nobody likes spending the $300 on rings, because they're not that cool. They're just
but it's like a fundamental part of the deal. Yeah. And the other thing, man, on all that stuff now, and I'm sure it's just because there's these growing communities, is you can resell them, dude. Like particularly if you're in areas like Denver or Phoenix metro like area, like dude, there's everybody. I mean, if you get one and you don't like it for some reason, you can get like a huge proportion of the money out in like a day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You could resell that stuff so fast. Because guys know what they're looking for, in those communities. They're like, hey, you can resell everything really quickly as long as it's in that like high end kind of market.
Yeah,
like Swaros, you can get your money back on Swaros in a minute.
Oh yeah, sure. And that's the thing is like, you hit on a point there, man. Like if you're like, oh, I'm gonna save instead of buying the $300 one, I'm gonna like buy this off-brand one that like, the camera guys use it, and it's like, well, dude, just stop, because if hunters don't use it and you try to sell it, you got a problem. You know what I mean? Just go with the ones that everybody's using. Figure it out. But no, I like that one, man. And then the last one I'll ask you, dude, because I love asking this question to guys like you, because one, you've had a lot of guides work for you, and I think that's a really cool data set because you get to see. I almost feel like, Tim, if you have guides working for you, you get to see the progression of a hunter compressed because they get reps. You know what I mean? Like the guys get really, a 24-year-old guy can be the equivalent experience of a 60-year-old
100%
person who thinks they've been hunting for 30 years or whatever. 100%. So you get to see that compressed improvement.
Yeah.
And then of course, you've done your own guiding, you've dealt with your own clients, you've done your own hunting. Are there any specific things that you think differentiate folks that progress quicker or become, better hunters quicker relative to just the average?
I think, and I guess it's a depiction of life, or, it's a kind of a mindset, is like guys that have a really good attitude. Whether it's in life or in hunting, I feel like that takes them to the next level, specifically when things get tough, because it's really hard as a first-time hunter to get into the Western hunting game and be successful. It just is, especially if you're trying to DIY it. It's very, very difficult. And the barrier to entry with like optics or knowledge, all that is a lot to get over. And so there's going to be a lot of failure up front for most people. If they don't have like a mentor or a guide, there's going to be a lot of failure. And I think the guys that push through that first, that failure time period where maybe they're not finding the right animals or they're not having any success, and they're seeing everybody on social media posting all this stuff that may or may not be smoke and mirrors, but they just have the illusion. I think if they can push through and have that right attitude where success will come if you keep grinding it out and keep doing things the right way. That's really what helps people get to that jump leaps and bounds over other people, or at least progress in their hunting career more than just the average guy. And that goes for guides too. And you can see it compressed, like you said, in a 7-day or 10-day hunt, where guys with a good attitude in 3 days of not seeing crap because of the weather or whatever, if they can keep through it, their attitude will actually give them opportunities that guys that had a bad attitude to start, and they'd say, I'm going home, I want to stay in my tent, you go look, I'm not going to see anything, like you put us in a bad spot. The guys that will push through that, they actually create opportunities on animal by their attitude, not because they're in the gym 24/7, not because they have the best optics, but because their attitude gets them there. And so that's, I guess, Cliff, that's the main thing that I've seen over the years with guides, clients, and myself. Like, I know when I've had a bad attitude, and it doesn't really, it's not a good return on investment versus, good attitude. So.
No, for sure, man. And it's a great one, Tim. And it always sounds, I think, a little abstract to people, but you bring up a good point that it's literally a mathematical reality. Mm-hmm. If you have a positive attitude, you're less likely to quit, which at least in the Western states, man, like that's 90% of the battle that nobody talks about.
Dude, it's under talked about. It's not talked about enough. How much failure.
I mean, like these backpack elk hunts, and it kind of makes sense. Like a backpack elk hunt in some wilderness area where the elk get the shit hunted out of them for 5 months. Like that's the hunt that most guys are starting on.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so they get into that, and then, quitting, if you can just fight that quitting element with a positive attitude, it just goes up on math because you're more like, you're out there more, right? Yep. I'd love to hear your opinion on this because I think it's a reality on guided hunts too. And I hate to even admit it because it applies to hunts that I personally have guided. Mm-hmm. When I was guiding a hunter with a positive attitude during tough hunts, I was a much better guide. Yeah. I was much more likely to stretch it. I was much more likely to push a situation where I thought, man, maybe we can do it, maybe not. If I had a positive guy, I gave him more opportunities. For sure.
And here's why, Cliff. Because as a guide, it's your responsibility to take care of the client. So if you're not spending all your emotional energy trying to keep somebody's attitude right, and you're actually spending all that energy on finding them an animal, you're going to find more animals. But if all your energy as a guide is trying to make this guy feel good, and hopefully he's having a good time, that definitely takes away from your ability to find animals. So it's like it snowballs on itself. It's like, oh man, how can I, does he need a hot chocolate? Where you could be like, no, I'm gonna stay on the mountain, dude. Can you make yourself a hot chocolate? I'm staying on the mountain, dude. Like it's like that level. But, and not every case is the same, but I think some of that is part of it.
No, for sure. And what you realize is, at least what I saw, is some guys that I guided a lot. And I'm sure you deal with them too, Tim. There's guys that spend a couple $100,000 a year hunting. They have that ability. They do that. So you run into them over and over, and some of them figure it out. Like even wealthy guys, they want to get the most bang for their buck, and they figured out that, man, if I trigger like some positivity during this thing, we're gonna get in the good spots, we're gonna get the good opportunities, and they're all about it,
Yeah, and you know what's funny about it is it's like those guys that are the least physically capable, they really have to get the most bang for their buck. They'll be like, hey man, do what you can do. I know I can't walk anywhere, but man, I'm here to have fun. And
sure.
All right, let's do this, man. I want to get this dude an animal. He's not like, I need to finish my North American 27, and if you don't do this for me, boy, I'm gonna have a word with you. And you're like, boy.
And by the way, I got a business meeting. I'm hoping to get to 4 days into this, or But those are just things that, I think they're worth talking about because they're things that I don't think get talked about enough. But Tim, I really enjoyed this, man. Where can people follow you?
I'm on Timmy Winslow, at Timmy Winslow, obviously on YouTube and Instagram too. So it's the same thing.
Cool.
So Timmy Winslow on YouTube, Timmy Winslow on Instagram. So
Good deal, man. We'll have to do it again. I have
yeah,
like a bunch of
I
other
had a good
questions we
time.
didn't get to.
Yeah, no,
So,
we'll
good
do it
deal.
again, Cliff, for sure.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no
Talk to you
problem,
later.
Cliff.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.